right? So the first thing I'm going to do is to try and implement some corrections on what you have done before. So as you can see, this is the outcome of your website. So at least with this, it shows that you have been able to know how to use HTML tag to create a website content. So the next thing we will now be looking at is I want to apply some CSS because it shows that your CSS is not strong yet. 360 food arena is expected to be at the middle since your content are not cutting across the entire screen or page. So how do we resolve that? So I go back to your file, then let me check if you have created, okay, you have created your CSS file and you have also connected it to your HTML. Now there shouldn't be need for this since you are using external CSS method, because I can see that you have linked your HTML with your CSS. If your CSS is still effective. Okay, so now the next thing is for you to identify the HTML elements. How do you reference them? Are they class elements, or you want to identify them by their tag names, or by ID? So there are three different ways we can actually select HTML elements in CSS. So I'm going to implement class here now. I can see that you have class the p tag A, which is responsible for welcome to 360. But I'm going to start from 360 food arena, so which I have mentioned earlier on that it should have been at the middle. So now the essence of classing HTML elements is so that when you are communicating with them in CSS, then you will be able to differentiate element A from element B, particularly where a tag or the same tag is used multiple times. So when styling it in CSS, how will you be able to differentiate which of the tag you are actually referencing? For example, like I can come here now and create another element with that same H1. So by the time I want to talk to these two elements in CSS, it becomes a challenge if they are not a class or ID. So that is the purpose of classing or ID elements, just to be able to identify them uniquely. So that is what I'm going to do. Now, for you to be able to class your element, where do I add the class name? The class name should be created as an attribute in the opening section of the tag. For example, you can see this is the opening section of H1, this is the closing section of H1. So if I want to add my class attribute, where do I add it? That is what I'm talking about. You don't add it here, we add it here. You come into the opening tag, you space, and then you type class, and then you now add your class name. So for instance, my class name is H1. So when I'm classing H2, or my class name is heading 1, let's say for instance. Now, to be able to communicate to this element in my external CSS, I have to call it by its class name. So I'll come here and then I say element with. You have to introduce your class element in CSS with dots. Element with the name heading is the one you are actually talking to, and then before you open your CSS brackets. Now, what are the properties? Like I told you before, I want to move it to the middle of this background. So to do that, the property is text align. So quickly type text align, and then the value of that property is center. So let's go back to the page and check and see if we have been able to or not, because you have you have you have you have you have some contradicting uh, properties here. So I think since you have already called it here, so here let's add it here. Let's say text align. Let's say center. So let's go back to the page. So you can see that I've been able to do that. Now, when you are developing your website, you need to be mindful of the color you are using. The color of the text, if you calculate the color of the text with the background color, there are a common color there that is making the name of the 360 food arena not to be that obvious to the user. So how do I rectify that? To rectify this, all you need to do is to, let me just navigate here and change the text color to something like white. Good, I think it's better because you can see you have part of your background, there are white property or elements that could actually complement this. Okay, so once that is sorted out, the next thing we need to sort out is your writing, your P tag. This black is not actually coming out from your background. So to rectify that, let's identify the element responsible for that from your HTML. So I think your P, the one you class A, and then one you class A1. So let me look at what you have assigned to A already. A, good. So I change the color to black as well. So I change the color to black, or sorry, white. Let's check. Okay, so it's more visible. So I also go for the A1, the one you class A1. So I will add color to it. Your color calculation matters a lot when you are building your website. You need to be mindful of that. How is the color you are using matching with other colors around it? So let's check. Okay. Now the font size, I think there is need to, you did not really have more content about your company, but next time please shouldn't use Lorem. I use Lorem because as an instructor, I don't have time to start creating your sentence. But next time, your own shouldn't be Lorem. Create a valid description for your business. So, uh, so what I'm going to do, I will just enhance the size from 12. Enhance the size from 12 to like 18. Let's check what 18 will produce. Okay, I think it's better this way. And then let me work on your images. Your images are not properly aligned. They are not, distributed across the page width. So how do we achieve that? So I'm going to reassign different widths to these two images. But to start with, let me look at how you structure those images in your CSS, your HTML structure. These are the two images, three images. One has an ID Pro, while the other one. So I would like to give all of them the same uh, the same identification. So there's no need for this. So let me use width attributes. Okay, so I can actually go to my CSS and style them using the tag name img. So I come here, I create another selector img, and then I open the brackets, and then I can just say width. The width, I want the width to be 400. Since there are three images, I want to have them in one row. So let me use 300 ps. So to see the output before, if there's need for the width, height rather. Okay, so now this is not still covering the entire uh, page. So let me see if I can increase it to 400. 400 ps. So let me check. Okay, so 400 ps is reasonable. Now let me assign the same height to all of them. So let's say height. So height. So just for me to make them a square shape image or images. So they all have the same height now. Now the next thing is for me to float, to push this image, to push it from here, because I can see that I have more space here. I have more space here. So when you are developing your site, you need to be mindful of the spaces around your elements. When you have an opening space like this, what it tells your users is that you are short of content. So you try as much as possible to fill up all the gaps. So to do this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to wrap the whole of these three elements, the three images, in another grouping element called div, and then I will float the div to the center, because the image tags, they are inline elements, they are not block elements. Remember what I will have told you about inline and block elements. Inline elements are elements that will continue on a straight line, while block elements are elements that will take new line. Each time they are added, they will take new line. So for me to be able to push this to the middle of this page, knowing that they are inline elements. So if, for example, now I say except, if for example now I say img margin, okay, let's try that and see what we are talking about. Let's say I want to push the image from the left hand side, trying to position them at the middle of that page. So if I say margin left, so push by 20%, push by 20%, for instance. So let's see what we have here. So you can see what happened. So what happened is that as soon as you assign that 20%, there is no longer space for the three of them to be on the same line. That is why they are forced automatically to display as block element. So let me reduce that 20%, so like 5%, and see what that will give to us. So that's is still not properly what position, because I want the three of them. So if I still want to achieve it, all I need to do is to reduce the width of the image so that three of them can be in the same row. So I can just make it 300, and then height also 300. Okay, let me check the output of this first. Okay, so this is good to go. But at the same time, the space I'm having here is not equal to the space I am having here. But that is actually my target. I want to make sure that the space I'm having here is equivalent to the space I'm having here. So I'm going to deploy another method, not using the margin method, or I'm going to use it, but that margin is not going to be assigned to the image, because it's actually created 5% left margin for all the images. So what I'm going to do, I have to go to my HTML and redefine the structure. The structure of your HTML matters a lot when it comes to how you communicate with them with CSS. So I'm going to create a grouping element which is called div, and that div I want to class it as container. Why? Because it's actually containing what? Three elements, three different images. So to create a div with a class name, instead of you typing div, just start with a class name using period dot container. And then once you hit enter, it will create a div with a class name container. So what I need to do to show that this container is actually wrapping other elements, so I will cut it from here, cut it from here. Just a minute. Okay, so like I was saying, so I cut the closing part of the div from here in order to bring it down to show that it's actually what containing these three elements. Now div is a block element, meaning that as soon as you add it, it comes with 100% width by default. So what I'm saying is that if you, for instance, now let me just do inline style and add border to it just to confirm that it is a block element that is taking 100% width. So if I say, for example, now 1ps and then the color, the line type to be solid and then the color type to be red, I just want to confirm to you that when you add an inline element, by default, it takes the entire width. So you can see it here. You can see that what the div automatically is taking the entire width. So now, but it is this div that we want to actually use to move the three images to the middle. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to my CSS and upgrade and take back the width to 400 now that we have wrapped them in a div, so that the space we are going to close will be minimum, just like this now. So the next thing I'm going to do, so I'll quickly talk to this div with a class name container, div with a class name container. So remember, this is the name we are using to reference the div grouping the three images. So I go to my CSS, and then of course to start class elements, you start with dot container, then I will say width. So what I'm doing is actually that. So I will just give it let's say 90%. 90%. So by the time you come here, you can see that uh, you have reduced the div. So now I'm going to float, I'm going to shift the entire div to the middle of the page so that all the items inside it can as well move to the middle of the page. So to do that, I go back to my CSS and then press enter. And then I will say margin. So you can actually use margin auto to move a block element to the middle. So if I come back here now, you can see that what I have created equal space. Look at the space I have here and the space I have here. So now all I need to do is to reduce. The reason why the other image went down because the width you assign to the images, this particular section, the remaining space here is not enough to accommodate the image. So to debug this out, all I need to do is to reduce the width of the images. So let me put it at 350. Then you can see that I have both of them. So I can still increase one more time, or I can even create, okay, let me increase one more time in order for this to move. Or there are different ways you can do that. You can also actually identify this image uniquely and increase only the width of this image to fill this space. That is where you are not really considering the three of the images having the same width. So now that I have to do that, then I will go back to the image, my HTML structure, and add class. And then I will name this one img3. Now the reason is that I want to increase the width of only this image without affecting this other two. So I go to my CSS, so .img3, and then open, then I will reconfigure the width to be, let me make this one with 400 ps. So let me check on the browser so you can see. So let me still add more. Let me make it 500. See how that will turn out. 500. The 500 is too much. So let me make it 450. 450. Okay, 450 is okay. So now I can decide to also shift the whole container a little bit to the right hand side in order to have equal space, because by the time I turn off this margin line, now it's going to create this as the margin to the right side, which is not going to be equal with this. So to rectify that, this is what I'm going to do. So I will add margin left to the margin left, not just margin left, that is I'm pushing it from the left hand side, margin left. So let me push it with 20% first and see what that will be. 20%. 20% is too much. 20% is too much. So let me push it by 5%. 5% is too small. Let me place it at 10%. 10% is too much. So let me put it at 8%. Okay, let me put it at 7%. Let me put it at 7%. Okay, so 7% is okay. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to turn off that border line that activated inline, because I actually use it to show you that the element was actually having a 100% width by default. So I don't need it again. It does not make my work look professional. I'll come here. Okay. Now these images, like you did before, you make this one a round shape image, and then you can also curve the edges or the corner by using border radius. So let me go to where I reference all of them. So let me come here and say what? Border radius. Border radius. So let me give border radius of 8 ps, for instance. Border radius of 8 ps. So you can see it makes it look more professional. Now remember that we styled this particular one uniquely, so it's easy for us to make it a round shape, that is to be able to talk to it uniquely. So I go back to my CSS. I think this is the class name img. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to declare its own different border radius, and like I told you, you make it 50%. You make it 50%. So you can come back here, you discover that what you have been able to achieve that. All right, so the next thing is for the background color you apply. I want to, okay, so I think so this is a few correction we can actually effect on what you have done. So take your time to go and update it to this stage before the next class. Thank you.